Our world is changing. First is climate change.
It's now indisputable that the climate crisis is one of the top security threats, not just to the developed world, but to the entire planet, to life on the planet itself.
Then there is the change brought on by artificial intelligence, or AI.
Tonight, a stark warning that artificial intelligence could lead to the extinction of humanity. It comes from dozens of industry leaders, including the CEO of ChatGPT creator OpenAI.
Finally comes the change arising from autocracy, populism, and their threats to democracy.
All around the world, democracy is under attack.
About a third of the global population is now being governed by leaders that can be described as authoritarian populists.
In this episode, we are going to talk about none of that. Instead, we are going to talk about a different kind of change. This change involves, well, me. And to do that, I will be joined by a very special guest.
Soumaya Keynes, The Financial Times.
Soumaya Keynes is an economics columnist at The Financial Times. For the benefit of our newer listeners, she started Trade Talks with me back in 2017. For over 4 years and nearly 160 weekly episodes, Soumaya mocked me cruelly about my love of multilateralism. I don't know why I invited her back, but I did. Today, Soumaya is going to trade talk with me about what comes next. Hi, Soumaya.
Hello, Chad.
You are listening to an episode of Trade Talks, a podcast about the economics of trade and policy. I'm your host, Chad Bown, the Reginald Jones Senior Fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics in Washington. Okay, so with more than a little bit of trepidation, Soumaya, I turn the podcast over to you.
Great. I am in charge again. Okay, and I am here and I am not happy. So first question, when I left Trade Talks, this thing that we built together that you promised to take care of and nurture, did you ever mean those promises? Were you always planning to abandon Trade Talks?
I did nurture it. I think we put together something like 42 episodes in the couple of years since then. So we've kept it going. But yeah, I mean, the big news for today is I am about to take a new job.
Okay, don't leave us hanging. What's the new job?
The new job is I am going to be the chief economist at the U.S. State Department in the Biden-Harris administration.
Ooh, that is a fancy job title. Congratulations. Right, okay, well, that sounds like an important gig. And am I right that you can't actually say anything interesting in relation to that job?
So this is what I can tell you about the details of the job. Supply chains, economic statecraft, diplomacy. And that's all I've got at the moment.
Okay, that tells me nothing. Great.
Perfect.
Okay. Is the reason you're going into the government because trade policy analysis is just so overwhelmingly exciting? You need a break from the cut and thrust of all of that, debate, action. Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. It's hard to get sleep at night with all of the everyday up and down of trade policy. No, I mean, obviously the last couple of years have been a little bit slow when it comes to trade policy, certainly in comparison to the last administration. Today, it's much more about industrial policy. If you want to look for trade policy, it's through things like that, subsidies, export controls in that vein. And this job isn't really about the day-to-day of trade policy either. Obviously, trade is going to be a really, really big part of it. But I think there's a lot of other things going on in the world with U.S. economic and diplomatic relations with other countries that it'll be even a little bit more than that, if you can imagine.
I mean, the other interpretation of what's happened is that trade policy is so boring right now that you need to go into the government to find out if there's something going on somewhere? Like, is there a tariff somewhere that you can analyze?
So let me cut you off there. I think it's heresy to say that trade policy is boring. As somebody who has spent his entire professional career looking at every single detail of trade policy, there's nothing more exciting than trade policy out there. So no, I'm just gonna cut you off from that train of thought. That is not it at all.
In the old days of trade talks, I would have cut that line because it was a lie. But I'm not in charge anymore, so we're just going to have to roll right on. Okay, next question. If you had to choose between Beyonce, Taylor Swift, or Blackpink to take over hosting trade talks, who would you go for?
So that's a tough one, as I'm huge fans of all three. I don't want to be trite, but I guess I'll have to go like probably everyone would with Taylor Swift. I know she's extremely busy. She's on tour. She's very busy with American football at the moment. But I think there's just a lot of international trade going on with Taylor Swift. She's got intellectual property rights issues. When she gives a concert in another country, she's a mode something. We could, have her explain the different modes of services trade. So I think there's a lot there if Taylor would be willing to take over for us. Okay, so let's turn the conversation. So Soumaya, what are you up to these days?
Well, I have moved. I'm no longer at The Economist. I am now a columnist at the FT, the Financial Times. And it's great. And later on this year, drumroll, I will be starting a new nerdy economics podcast. And this was such a well-timed advert for it that it doesn't actually have a name yet. And the upside of that, I suppose, is that listeners can suggest names. So please, if you can think of a name for a new economics podcast, very geeky, very nerdy, like Trade Talks, but kind of for everything, then get in touch. My email address is soumaya.keynes@ft.com.
So in your new podcast, if you had to guess right now, what share of the episodes would you devote to trade? Would it be 80%, 90%, or 120%?
It's not going to be many from where we currently are. I've got to get something interesting to base these episodes on. And let's face it, there's nothing going on, right?
Right. Well, I'm taking the podcast over again, so I'm in charge. And I think with that, we're going to end the conversation. Soumaya, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And that is all for Trade Talks. A huge thanks to my friend, Soumaya Keynes at the Financial Times, for coming back and grabbing the podcast reins. Okay, before I sign off, I wanted to make 3 or 4 last points. First, I want to say a really big thanks to a lot of people at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. This starts with my boss, Peterson Institute President Adam Posen, for his unwavering support of Trade Talks since our beginnings. When Soumaya and I created Trade Talks back in 2017, the Peterson Institute believed in us. They let us do our thing. Peterson provided us with institutional, intellectual, moral, and financial support. We never had to find advertisers or raise money. There is no better place to work than Peterson, and I'm incredibly grateful for the artistic, academic, and editorial freedom Peterson gave us to create and sustain Trade Talks for 200 episodes. So thanks to Adam, and thanks to the entire Peterson Publications and production team of Steve Weissman, Melina Cobb, Helen Hillebrand, Jeremy Tripp, Sarah Tu, Anjali Bhatt, Susan Luchin, Eitan Erkowitz, and a lot of other people too. I also wanted to thank Trade Talks audio engineer Colin Warren at Lost in Transduction. As anyone who has had a conversation with me in real life will know, it's really hard to make me sound normal, let alone good. For Trade Talks, Colin has been an incredible partner. I also want to thank all of our very special guests. To be honest, if podcasting had been a thing when I was a kid, then hosting a podcast about international trade was what I would have dreamed of doing when I grew up. Think about it. My job has been to talk to some of the smartest people on the planet about their research into what I think about all the time, international trade and policy. The generosity of Trade Talks guests has made doing this job an incredible honor. My last but most important thanks are to all of the Trade Talks listeners. Every time you liked an episode on Twitter or reacted on LinkedIn, I noticed. It mattered. Every time you came up to me in person and mentioned Trade Talks, at a conference or at a meeting or on the subway, it mattered. Even your emails sending me technical corrections, I always appreciated. Thank you for engaging. So that's all for now. No 2 underscore jokes today. Just wish me luck.